Well, there's another part of my life back in those early years, which actually went, it really started, I would say, in the 1960s and 1970s, when the practical joke side of my hobby was quite active. You might have seen some of the videos on some of the things that I had built back then. In the 60s, make a shocker. Now nowadays, of course, you can buy that stuff and ready-made and everything. But then I'd build things out of transformers and stuff, and simple things like an audio output transformer can be a shocker. If you're familiar with the audio output transformer, your turns ratio on the primary used as an audio output transformer, you'd have many more turns on the primary. Secondary, being where the speaker would go, would have many less turns on it. Well, if you took and reversed the... Here is a simple audio output transformer from a vacuum tube radio, cheap old radio like a clock radio or something back in the 50s and 60s. The 8 ohm side, or the low impedance side, for the normally would go to the speaker, and have your 1.5 volts or a little more perhaps, and a make and break contacts right here. So you just, doesn't matter what polarity you use, you're just touching them on and you're taking them off. And as a result, you get your, due to the collapsing of the magnetic field, counter EMF set up for high voltage output, low current. Set of breaker points, and in this case I used to simply take the 2 wires that would go onto the speaker, and you take a 1.5 volt flashlight battery, and you'd spark them like this. And each time you make and break, you don't hold it on, because transformers don't like DC, and you're not going to get anything out of the other end. But when you get pulsating DC, you spark it, let it go, and then a collapsing magnetic field in the secondary would give a very high voltage coming out of what was the original primary, being, we're talking about audio output transformers now. One of the things that I used to do when I was in my mischieful years, into mischief I should say, one time my neighbor, and this goes back to the early 1970s now, we're coming up in a few years, my neighbor had a table. It had wooden legs, but it had a metal top. And I guess the husband had used it for a workbench. He brought it out to the backyard, and it was used as a picnic table for, we had a little picnic out there. And I was invited. I bet they were sorry they ever invited me. So, what I had done, and another buddy of mine was in on this also. So, I had a little output transformer and a 1.5 volt battery, nothing fancy. I took the, as I said, the voice coil side of the transformer was used as the primary in this case, using the other end, which would become the secondary, to go to the table. So I'd ground one on the, we did this from the cellar. We'd ground it to the cold water pipe, and then I'd run a thin wire out to the picnic table. Run it up the leg very carefully and connect it to the picnic table with a little clip. And then when anybody touched the picnic table, I'd just go, I could see out of the cellar window and give them shocks. And they knew right away who was responsible for this. Then I used to make little portable shockers. And it consisted of a step-up transformer, of course. Usually the audio output transformers work the best. And instead of using the make and break system by hand, I simply took a little cassette motor and wired that in series with the voice coil winding of the audio output transformer, along with 4D cells. So you had 6 volts going in there. And the motor would run. And of course, the motor had the brushes. So each time that the motor was going, I was making and breaking on the commutator. And that would send pulses out, and you would get a good shock out of the other end. That was portable. It was a little box. It was very easy to carry around, and I think I showed you that at my workshop. And that's up there for nostalgic reasons. Made a few of these things and got cussed at a few times. I wonder why. Yeah, I did some practical jokes, but nothing really bad, you know. I mean, I would, never do anything that actually hurt anybody. Cigarette loads was one thing, though, that I have done back in the early 60s. Still got a package of cigarette loads somewhere around, believe it or not, up in my workshop from the very early 1960s, when I used to work at the restaurant that I was telling you about in another video. Back then, of course, you could smoke in the restaurants, and the waitress would smoke like a chimney, and she'd leave a cigarette down and take and load the damn thing up. And actually, she left a whole pack there, and we just loaded the cigarettes up. And another dishwasher I was working with at that time, no, it wasn't either, I stand corrected, it was the cook. He didn't like smoking either, so we'd load these things up and take a toothpick, one of these big toothpicks, and what you do is you get the cigarette, and you at the very end, you dead center, you would gently ream out a hole. Cigarette loads they were nothing but a piece of wood with white powder on them. But you had to be careful, because you wanted to cut the hole, you want to make the hole big enough so that you can gently push this in without knocking off that powder. Because then the powder would all be at the end of the cigarette, and when they lit it, it would start sparkling, and that would be a dead giveaway. So you had to make sure that the hole was big enough so that this thing almost dropped in. Then you take the toothpick and you'd go around very gently and push the tobacco flush with the end of the cigarette, so it looks like nothing's wrong. So you'd watch the reaction. They light it up and they puff away and they puff away, and bang! Ah, you son of a bitch! The cook, he was a lot older than me. He was in his 60s, 65 or so anyways at that time. And and of course I was young. I was only probably about 19 or 20 or so, somewhere in that area at the time in the early 60s. Well, let's see, 63, I was 20 years old. So, yeah, those are good old days. Cigarette loads. I don't even think you can buy the things anymore. Sometimes we'd get a little carried away and we'd put 2 of them things in there. But we didn't go any more than 2, because, they blow the hell out of the cigarette. You don't want to hurt anybody, I used to pull that all the time on my cousin, too. She was a heavy smoker back in the 60s and 70s, and I used to, when I go to visit her, I used to blow her cigarettes up, too. Oh, the good old days. Well, I think that's it. I think that's all I'm going to discuss now. I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, blow up some cigarettes, will you? I'd like to hear the noise. Good day.